All right, everybody, welcome back to the Learning Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Dustin William. I have my co-host with me, Whitestone.
I shall now attempt to show how the most important of these principia have been crystallized into the pithy form of maxims and have influenced and developed that grand system of truth known as equity jurisprudence.
The power is neutral. It's sitting in the quintessence until you invoke it. All right, welcome everybody to the Learning Out Loud podcast. This is hour one. We have made it all the way to, what are we on, episode 18 today, and we are going back to the fruits of Yale. I am your owner and producer over at True Life Productions. You can find all of our work at truelifeproduction.com. Go over there, hit all aboard, Article 3 articulations, and all of the extra goodies. You can also get the second hour of the podcast you are listening to right now, which you are not going to want to miss. In the second hour, we are going to get into some pretty interesting things, like a guy named Theophilus Eaton. We talked about him on our last Fruits of Yale episode, and he is actually not the stepfather of Elihu Yale, but David Yale, Elihu Yale's father. So that's a correction for the last episode. But we're going to get deep into him and his connections with Queen Elizabeth's commercial expansion companies, or all of the shipping companies that she chartered back in the day, the monopolies that she chartered, basically. So, but before we get to any of that, let's introduce our co-host, Whitestone. How is it going, man?
I'm doing great. I actually really enjoyed doing a little bit of the background research for this when it comes to that, commercial shipping company, because during that time there were so many things taking place, so many changes happening, that going on around the world that kind of helps put all of that into context. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this because most people are familiar with the East India Trading Company and a lot of control and everything that they had. And I think this is one of the main mechanisms that they get control over things is by creating these commercial companies who have a charter and giving them the ability to make laws. So I think it's going to be a very interesting episode.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out that's exactly how New Haven was founded, and that's basically with the donation of Yale. It's basically how Yale was founded, with two Queen Elizabethan companies. So we hope to see everybody over on the second hour there. Whitestone he's got a good chronological book that he's going to dig into for us and really lay down a timeline of a lot of other things that were happening in the world at that time. So I'm excited to get there. But before we get there, I was digging into my Bible this morning, so I did want to, and we are a couple of law and equity guys, so I did want to bring up the passages I was reading. I am currently doing a study on the stories of redemption from the Bible, all 33 of them, and Romans chapter 8. There's one of those stories. This isn't the story of redemption in this book, but this does give a little context to that. And we're just going to go through Romans 8, 1 through 8. And what we're going to do here is basically, this is Paul writing to the Romans. And what he's telling them is that the Roman law is no more. And that because of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, we are now in a new law, or a new covenant, as it could be described, one that is not of the flesh, but of the Spirit. And this is one of our favorite things to talk about, is the distinctions between law and equity, and also finding all of these references in the Bible, because there are so many of them. And I think Whitestone feels the same way as I do. This is what I use as my ultimate authority. And this is actually the government's ultimate authority too. If you trace everything back long enough, then you will understand that the United States Constitution is a Calvinist document, and there's founding fathers exactly quoting that the Constitution of the United States is a Calvinist document. And basically what that means is they were reading this Bible right here, the 1560 Geneva Bible that I am pulling out of, And that is how they wrote the Constitution, was all of the concepts they found in this Bible. They pretty much condensed it down to the Constitution. And that is, when we are not under military doctrine, that is the authority we were under. So, in order for us to understand these things and edify these subjects in our mind, we like to go back through the Bible and read some of these things. So before I start reading these passages, do you have anything you want to add to that, Whitestone?
No, I think we should just go ahead and get into it.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, this is Romans 8, 1 through 8. And I will just um so yeah, this is like I said, this is Paul writing to the Romans. That's who wrote the book of Romans, was the Apostle Paul, who was formerly Saul. Excuse me, a Roman himself. So now this is starting at verse 1. Now then, there is no condemnation to them that are in Christ Jesus, which walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life, which is in Christ Jesus, hath freed me from the law of sin and of death. The clear distinction there. For that was impossible to the law, inasmuch as it was, quote, weak because of the flesh, God sending his own son in the similitude of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh. So let me read that without the the parentheses there. For God send his own son in the is that a similitude, Whitestone? Verse 3.
Yeah, I was looking at it's got to be similitude, like it's similar because in the Masonic Bible it says God sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh. So likeness,
Okay.
similitude. I think yeah, that's what they're going after there.
Okay, so yeah, it must be similitude. This is the Geneva Bible, and he's reading out of the Masonic Bible. So God sending his own son in the similitude of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh. So what he's saying there is God was sent here in the image of man, which is a flesh, sinful flesh, because we are all made of sinful flesh under the old Roman law. But now that we have Christ Jesus on the cross for us, we are now under a new law. And moving on to verse 4, that the righteousness of ye law might be fulfilled. Oh, actually, for this, I thought this was so in the parentheses here, that was impossible to the law, inasmuch as it was weak because of the flesh. So I thought that was really almost similar to Aristotle's definition of equity right there, Whitestone. How do you feel about that? Do you remember what his
Yeah,
definition was?
because Aristotle's, if I'm not mistaken, his definition of equity is that the equity is the rectification of the law due to its universality or
You're
something, some
correct.
along those
Yep, yep.
lines. And because in here, at least in the Masonic, it says, "For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh."
Okay, yeah.
So
Okay, yeah,
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 it's
yeah.
saying the same thing that what the law can't do is because it's weak through the flesh, because flesh and spirit are two different things. The law is
Yes.
bound to the laws of flesh, and flesh is inherently limited, which is what, because spirit is not like spirit is equity.
Yeah.
It can go anywhere. It's pervasive. It can go back in time, and it can pretty much just do it. It's the lifeblood of the flesh.
Yeah.
And so that's why the
Yeah.
spirit is, more powerful is because the law and the flesh are kind of one and the same thing. They're limited in what they can do, but they're total in their dominion or their sphere of control.
Yeah, and when we are saying law here, and the law and flesh in these eight passages are basically synonymous. And what we're saying in law, what is Paul is referencing is the Mosaic law from the Old Testament, which is the law that the Jews of today still follow because they will not accept the New Testament covenant through the blood of Jesus Christ, and that is the distinction between the religions right there. So,
However, I
but
will say real quick though that there are a lot of Jews right now that are in Israel that are pushing back so hard, and I'm rooting for them.
Oh yeah,
because
I
there's
absolutely am too. Yeah.
there's a lot of Jews out there that absolutely are unapologetic when they say that they do not like Zionism, that Zionism does not stand for the Jewish people, and that, you know, what has been constructed in terms of like the Zionist Jewish state
Oh,
is entirely
you
destructive. And a lot of
is
these
that
Jews are
me? You
getting
keep
beat up
cutting
in the
out. Is
streets,
your
getting dragged out by authorities, and they're having a hell of a time over there. So who knows? You know, maybe we'll see a lot more converts to Christianity, but time will tell.
no fucking way, dude. Zoom is censoring us right now.
Wait, what?
Mm. Yeah, you were saying a couple of hot button words, and it was literally cutting them out. Guess, and you can guess which words you were saying. The ones that start with a Z.
No kidding.
I swear to God, I was like, "Is your mic cutting out, bro?" No, it's in the transcript, but it's not on the recording. So everybody can go look at the transcript at truelifeproduction.com if they don't delete it, that is.
Okay, yeah, there's wow, I'm not gonna self-censor and use a different word. I said what I said, but
Yeah, no, fuck that. Yeah, that's
yeah,
crazy. Wow, dude. I that just blew my mind. Yep.
yeah. The
Yeah,
man
actually,
behind the
just so
mirror,
everybody can see
everybody.
it here, we'll put it up on the screen so everybody knows I'm not lying. Right there. Those words got cut out when you were speaking.
That's crazy because you know what? I was actually advocating for Jews and we got
I know,
censored.
isn't that crazy? And we got censored. Yeah, we're on your side.
Yep,
Jeez, dude. That's crazy. All right. Anyways, moving on.
whatever.
I'm fucking annoyed now.
Whatever.
All
You
right.
know what? Put it on my
Yeah.
tab. It's whatever.
Yeah, dude, we're doing the Lord's work. I don't even give a fuck. Go ahead, Zoom. Have fun. Censor all you want. We're still gonna do our work. That's crazy. All right. You know what? Maybe they just saved us from YouTube too. So, haha, you're actually doing our work. Um, anyways, here we go. All right. So, uh, yeah, let me finish. So we were on verse 4 there. I just want to finish these 8 verses right here. So they that the righteousness of ye law might be fulfilled in us, which walk not after the flesh, but after the spirit. For they that are after the flesh savor the things of the flesh. For they that are after the flesh savor the things of the flesh, but they that are after the spirit, the things of the spirit. For the wisdom of the flesh is death, but the wisdom of the spirit is life and peace. And that goes right back to all these dead entities getting pushed around in our birth certificates and all that shit these days. The wisdom of the flesh is death. That's verse 6 right there. So, verse 7, because the wisdom of the flesh is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither is deed can be. So then, that they are in the flesh cannot please God. So basically saying if you're following the old law and you're not accepting the new covenant, you are not accepting God. So, that brings us to the conclusion on that. Do you have anything you want to add to it before we move on,
Well,
Wes?
I was gonna say the verse 6 and 7 when they talked about the wisdom. What did it say? For the wisdom of the flesh and the wisdom of the spirit. They changed that in the Masonic Bible, or at least the KJV, because the Masonic Bible that I'm reading is the authorized KJV version. There's just a lot
Okay.
of other things in the Bible referencing the history of Masonry. But in verse
Okay.
6 and 7, because yours says, "For the wisdom of the flesh is death, but the wisdom of the spirit is life and peace." And in this one, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." So they don't use the word wisdom.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah. And then number 7, the Geneva Bible says, "Because the wisdom of the flesh is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the
Subject.
law of God, neither indeed can be." And then 7, "Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be."
Hmm. So they just replaced wisdom with carnal mind. I don't
Yeah.
like that. I like wisdom a lot better.
Yeah, because they used wisdom for flesh and they use wisdom for spirit. Like there are things to know and things to learn, but
Right.
in it seems in the KJV they pathologize any knowledge of the flesh, any knowledge of the flesh as carnal mind, and so it's almost pathologized in being animalistic rather than there is wisdom in death and wisdom in the flesh, but it just seems that they're steering your understanding of the flesh on this side as being carnal.
Yeah. Huh. Which I mean, I guess that would be the wisdom. It is carnal. The flesh is carnal, so I kind of get that. But I don't know. I prefer the word wisdom there. It
Yeah,
just
and there's
yeah.
another reference there to trust law because in 7 it says, because the carnal mind or the wisdom of the flesh is enmity against God, for it is not
Mhm.
subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So they're talking about like, because whenever you give a deed to somebody, you're granting, equitable title, or you're moving legal title. There's a
Mm-hmm.
deed for that. And so what they're saying is that if you're carnally minded or if you're in the flesh, you cannot be subject to the law of God, even if it's through some sort of deed or a covenant or a pact or an
Yes.
agreement. You
Yes.
can't
If you
you
don't
cannot
accept it,
get
yeah.
into the law of God through the law of contract or the law of agreement if you're still residing and abiding within the flesh and operating on the knowledge and wisdom of death in the flesh. So it's
Yeah.
something that is not subject to it. So it would be that deed would be invalid. You cannot contract your way in. It must be accepted within first.
Exactly. You must accept Christ first. You can't. Yeah, there's no piece of paper that's going to get you into the kingdom of heaven. For sure. Yeah, no, that's yeah, good catch right there. I really like that. Sweet. All right. Yeah, so me, I love my Bible. I love reading the Bible. I love my Geneva Bible. I love looking at the differences between the Geneva and the KJV. We're always finding some real good stuff in there. So, that's all I got. I don't think we need to go through the footnotes, even though the footnotes in the Geneva Bible are fire. Um, uh, yeah, we're not here to talk about the Geneva Bible today. We are here to talk about Yale College. Okay. So, we are going to talk about Yale College today. And so I've been working on a little mind map over here. Still trying to figure out how to do this in the correct way, but I figured it would be a good visual representation for everybody here. Um, because uh so when I started this little study, we actually so just for a little review, we started over here with John Davenport, okay? He is really the one who is credited with actually like founding New Haven Colony. He's the one who came up with the idea of the government to be governed by the Bible instead of, a government by man, which I love that concept. Actually, that is a great concept. And if I ever make my own town, that's how we're going to be governed. But he's the one who really is credited with founding New Haven, and he's the one who really had the idea for a collegiate school in New Haven. Even though it originally started in Saybrook, that was the original plan. But he's the one who really got the idea off of the ground for a collegiate school in that area, along with all of these other people over here. We are going to do, we're going to talk about all of these people, but we're not. These are all of the other signers of the fundamental agreement or original constitution of the colony of New Haven, which we did go through um, last time, and we talked about where the scripture will hold the precedence for the government in their community. So, but towards the end of the last Yale show that we did, we made a little discovery on the back end about this guy right here named Theophilus Eaton. And this guy is a very interesting fella. I originally became interested in him because we, when we were going through it, we were reading some of my notes, and we discovered that Eaton was the stepfather of somebody. We originally thought he was the stepfather of Elihu Yale, which is the namesake and donator of all the books, and a portrait of King George the First also. That's another thing he donated to Yale College, which I always thought was very interesting. I was like, why did he just donate this? Obviously, it was still colonial rule and stuff like that back then, but I just thought it was something really random to donate a portrait of King George the First, like portraits were a big deal back then. They were very expensive. They were very time consuming. And, you know, it was a big deal to give somebody a portrait. I just thought that was very interesting. And it didn't make sense to me until I started researching his step grandfather, because Theophilus Eaton is actually the stepfather of David Yale Sr., who is the father of Elihu Yale. Okay. Um, and so that's Theophilus Eaton. We're gonna do a deep dive on him in the second hour. But what we're gonna get into here on the first hour is the actual Yale side of everything, because we are here still talking about the founding of New Haven, and somebody named Thomas Yale Jr. Was one of the original signers of the fundamental agreement. So Thomas Yale Jr. His stepfather was Theophilus Eaton, and he was brothers with David Yale Sr., the father of Elihu Eaton, or Elihu Yale, sorry. So, um, you know, and I started getting into this Yale side of everything, and you see here there's a David Yale Sr., David Yale Jr., Thomas Yale Sr., Thomas Yale Jr., and those are in different generations of these guys. And then you get up here, and there's a David Yale who's a chancellor, and then you actually let's just add him right now. Oh wait, no, I don't have a note card for him yet. But his father was, and I just came on this discovery last night. That's why I don't have him in this mind map yet. But it is apparently David Yale's father, the chancellor, who was born. Oh shoot, I didn't get his birth date in here. But his father was another Thomas Yale of a Welsh branch that is apparently a direct descendant or was affiliated in some way with the Tudors of England. So if we extrapolate from there, I mean, it's basically, you know, the Tudor dynasty in a trickle down way had um, a hand in founding New Haven Colony and Yale. So it was through these familial ties that happened. His father was tied in. Well, that's it's I will say it's speculation on my part right now, because I don't have the actual SOIs on that, statements of interest, which are proof on that yet. But I am working on it, because what I've been working on basically this entire week is trying to figure out who the fuck is who in this tangled web of people. Um, so let's start getting into that, because it is pretty important that we disambiguate all of this stuff before we get in there. Do you got anything you want to add before I start yapping about the separating these names and stuff?
No, go ahead.
Cool. All right. So basically what we're dealing with here is there's two different Yale lines. Well, no, it's one Yale line, but there's two different names going on. Okay, so the first one we're gonna handle here is the David Yales. So we have a David Yale up here. That's this guy right here, the chancellor. And then he is the father of Thomas Yale Sr., right here. And Thomas Yale Sr. is the one who married Anne Lloyd Eaton, or Anne Lloyd Yale. Her name was Anne Lloyd. That's her maiden name. Her father's name is Bishop George Lloyd. So he marries Anne Lloyd. And then, okay, so, and then Anne Lloyd is the one who marries Theophilus Eaton. And obviously, she is the mother to David Yale Sr. and Thomas Yale Jr. So, how it goes David Yale Chancellor, Thomas Yale Sr., David Yale Sr., Thomas Yale Jr., then down, David Yale has David Yale Jr., and then David Yale Sr. also has Elihu Yale, and that is the namesake of Yale College. He's the one who made the donations. So that is the connection of everything down to Yale College, which is what this whole series is about. So that's the David Yale side. And then this is the guy I was just talking about, the Thomas Yale of the Welsh trunk. He is the father of David Yale, the chancellor. And then, like I said, David Yale, the chancellor, has Thomas Yale Sr., who has Thomas Yale Jr., who is one of the signers of the fundamental agreement on the original the original Constitution for the colony of New Haven. So that is our connection to New Haven is Thomas Yale Jr. And Theophilus Eaton is his stepfather, and Lloyd is his mother, and Thomas Yale Sr. was his father. So did that make sense the way I just explained that at all?
Yeah, and I think what people need to keep in mind is all of these families that are responsible for institutions, corporations, and government. There's a lot of intermarrying, there's a lot of divorcing and remarrying, and who knows if that is part of the planned bloodlines where, they will take a bloodline and they'll split it. And, one bloodline goes down and achieves one thing, the other part goes and she achieves another thing. Who's to say that these are all not part of just some intricate breeding program? Because when you look at it, it seems complex. But when you look at the result, it seems like that's exactly what they were trying to do. So it has to be planned marriages, and there's some sort of formula that they're using to move all these people around.
Well, yeah, and that's why it took me so long to construct all of this stuff because once you start getting all these names and these affiliations that are connected, all of the same names pop up, and you're like, wait, is that junior, senior, the third, this, that, the other? And I think that is all on purpose.
It
And
is. It is
yeah,
because there's what was I reading? I don't remember what I was reading, but it was talking about how a lot of these ancient important families, no, I think it was when I was reading about the Medici's, is they say they would purposefully name the grandson after the grandfather continually all the way down so as uh, to
that's
confuse people
exactly what they did. That is
to make it
literally
confusing.
exactly
That's
what they
exactly
did.
why, because
Yes.
you're seeing the same name just with a slightly different end kind of appended onto it where it's like, oh, junior, senior, the second, the third. But for the rest of it, the name looks the same. And so it's very hard to chronologically identify these people because you're literally just reading the same name over and over and over again. And we don't, it's harder for us to track, but they absolutely know and they do it on purpose.
I had such a head, and I already told you we were talking a little bit before we got on the call today. So there's just something in the air this week. Like my brain was just not working. I was I was struggling already, and then having to do this timeline on top of it, dude. I'm telling you, my brain is scrambled eggs right now,
Yeah.
trying to disambiguate this entire thing. So much so to where I made this entire thing right here, just so I could have a reference to go back to and say which freaking one is which of these dudes. And
But when
it's
you
so
also look, each one of these people have a direct tie, whether it's commercial or whether it's royal or educational or something like that. Each one of these people seems to have had their life cut out for them at a very young age in order to help construct part of this big system that we're all living in, or that they're
oh
gearing
yeah,
up towards.
yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly why I wanted to talk about these particular people today, because this Anne Lloyd character, she is the crux of it all. She's the important part, obviously, because she uh she marries so yeah. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. So she marries Thomas Yale Sr. And so Anne Lloyd and Thomas Yale Sr. are both descendants of King John. And King John is in reference to like King John of the Magna Carta. So they're basically from the same bloodline. And I think that's why it was really important for Theophilus Eaton to marry this chick and continue and make this continuation down here. Because as we just found out, David Yale, the chancellor's father, was part of the Tudor dynasty. So if what we're saying is true at all, that would make sense that they needed to keep this the way it is. And I don't think this Anne Lloyd chick had a say in her marriage, and you will see she was not happy in life. She actually got excommunicated from New Haven at one point.
Well, a
She
lot, a lot of in those breeding programs and in those families, a lot of times the women, they'll refer to them as like, I think in the Medici's they referred to her as like the queen mother or the head mother or whatever it is, and and it's not to be rude or anything, but they use them like breeding cows.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
even Princess Diana, had made some comment that she just says, "I'm just the brood mare."
Yeah.
Like having basically making a reference to the fact that she's like, I'm literally just here to provide children for them. And a lot of the women are like that, where because if you think about the mitochondrial DNA, is you can follow that all the way back through the mother's side. So you can, because that's the thing about why I think that side usually it's very what am I trying to say? Where mother dominated in terms of tracing lineages, it's all done through the mother and not necessarily through the father. Because of the
Yeah.
mitochondrial DNA, you
Yeah.
can trace back to all the way back to the original female, whereas it's harder to do it with the man. And so I
That's
think
why Jews trace through the mother. Yep. That's
that's why
exactly
you
right.
see this link seems like between one of the Yale sides and the Eatons happens to be this lady Ann Lloyd. And so they do.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
use those
Mm-hmm.
women as links between two different structures of power in order to achieve ends. And a lot of that's done through their breeding programs.
Yeah, yeah. She was a very obvious continuation of power, for sure. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. And so anybody who is listening in just the audio, I do actually have a mind map pulled up right now. If any of that disambiguation of the names was confusing, because it is confusing to me still, but I do have a visual representation up on the screen right now. If you're curious, and you can see how all of these things are working together here. So I think, but that I just wanted to disambiguate all of that stuff first. Now we can start getting in to a couple chronologies of these people. So we're gonna
And
start.
just to
Go
clarify,
ahead.
because I'm looking at this, the Yale lineage is obviously responsible with an academic institution that we're all familiar with, and out
Yes.
of that academic institution comes secret societies, the shaping of the socioeconomic or the political or whatever environment, and so the Yales are intimately tied to that. And Theophilus Eaton is obviously tied up in that. And the reason that's important is because what we're about to get into is a commercial trading company that was
Yes.
started through a royal charter later on. Who ends up being part of that whole network is Theophilus Eaton, who married into the Yale family. So there's a connection between the creation of academic institutions and breeding grounds for a particular brand of intellectualism and the global international commerce trade sort of world. So
Yeah.
there's a link right there through family ties, I guess is what we're trying to point out.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's why I thought it was so important because I wasn't planning on going back into the founding of New Haven until like the last 5 minutes of our last episode um that we were discussing this and we discovered the whole Theophilus Eaton bit. And then I was like, oh, that is super, super interesting. I need to look way deeper into that guy. And when I did it, I was like, oh, yeah, we need to
Yeah.
talk about this. The roots run way deeper than we first anticipated here. And there's way more of a commercial aspect than I think either of us
And what I
anticipated
have
before.
found in my, I guess, concurrent studies is that around that time, there were many commercial companies that were given charters to start international trade and start planting the flag everywhere. One of which was the original Virginia charter in 1606, which was called the
Mm.
Virginia Company of London. So keep that in mind.
Yep, it's like yeah, London is a big story through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Is a big player through this whole thing, as we'll
Yeah,
see.
and the Virginia Company of London was the very first colonist settlement over here in America. And so
Yeah,
we have a commercial company out of London, who we all know is the financial center, the financial hub, launched a commercial company, came over here, planted a flag, and that was our first colony.
yep, yep,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, such a great point. That's it. Everything is commerce and war. Once you break it down, it's all commerce and war. So let's get into that. Let's get into Well, yeah, I guess, of this line, he's kind of the patriarch, but I really, now that I've looked into it more, I consider the Welsh guy the real patriarch of this family. But we're going to talk about Thomas Yale. I refer to him as Thomas Yale Sr. Um, and he lived from 1586 to 1626. So Thomas Yale Sr. was born into a cadet branch of the Yale family that had moved from ancestral seat of Plas Yalan into the estate of Plas Grano near Wrexham, Devonshire. His father, David Yale, the chancellor that we talked about earlier, chancellor and vicar general of the Diocese of Chester, a kinsman of the earlier ecclesiastical lawyer Thomas Yale, uh, the from the Welsh branch, Dean of the Arches. His mother, Frances Lloyd, daughter of the Admiralty Judge John Lloyd, whose 1607 name the many whose 1607 will named the many Yale grandchildren. This is the gentry clerical milieu of Chester and northeast Wales into the patriarch which was born. So, and interesting enough, um, he was baptized on my birthday, April 12th, 1586, which there's that date actually comes up a few times in this episode, which I thought was really interesting. April 12th seems to be a very big day. That's when the Civil War started. It ended 2 days after that. So just a lot of interesting things happening on that day. Okay, so and this brings us to 1612. And on April 13th, the day after his birthday, interesting enough, a marriage license was issued in the Diocese of Chester for Thomas Yale, son of David Yale, LLD, Vicar General, and Anne Lloyd, daughter of George Lloyd, Bishop of Chester. Um, which, hold on. Yeah, so, oh, yeah, okay. I didn't catch that before. So, yeah, Anne's father is George Lloyd, and Thomas Yale's mother was Frances Lloyd, the daughter of an Admiralty judge. So there must be a huge connection there that we need. Man, we're just gonna have to keep pushing this thing on back. But
Yeah,
that
it's a
just
big
goes,
club and we ain't in it.
yeah, for sure. That just goes to show you how big the club is, and we have never been invited in because here on both sides of this Yale line, there's a Lloyd that they're joining this line into. So yeah, it just it goes right along with what we were just talking about, the continuation of these names and lineages and stuff. You can see it unfolding right here. So they baptize their oldest daughter. They have a daughter named Anne Hopkins, 1613, 1614. Baptism of their son, David Yale Jr. So, and he January 12th, 1614 is when David Yale Jr. is baptized, and he's the one who will eventually marry Ursula Knight, and then Father Elihu Yale, the namesake of Yale College. So that is the birth of David Yale right there. And then they have another son, Thomas Yale Jr., and that is the one who signed the fundamental agreement in New Haven, and he's baptized in 1616. So they have another child in 1616 to 1618. They aren't really relevant to the story right now. So Thomas Yale made his will on October 15th, 1619, naming his wife and his surviving children. It was recorded in Chester on March 27th, 1620, with the 1612 marriage license attached and probate inventory valued at 36 euro, 10 to, I don't know, some European money. The will is the primary instrument setting the family affairs on the eve of the widow's remarriage. So the will giving her all of the property. This is where she receives all of the property from the Yale line after he's going to die. There in 1619. And
On the 22nd of November at
yeah,
33. Okay.
isn't don't you love that? Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So Thomas Yale Sr. was buried November 27th or 22nd, November 22nd. Is there anything else that's happened on that day? Is that a special day?
What's the date again? Um,
November 22nd. Yeah. It was weird.
1619. Isn't that the name of the 1619 project or something?
Oh yeah, probably. But is that, or wait, did Kennedy get shot on the 11th, or was it the 11th or the 22nd?
Oh, you know what? Let me see. Let me fast forward all the way to 1963 here. Give me a moment. Also, it's
Okay.
interesting. 22nd of November, that's 2211, and he's
Yep.
33. So you
Yep.
got two
I caught that
33
too. Yep.
intros in there.
Yep. Yep. That's two
Um,
33s, which may or may not be a Masonic reference. Who knows? Maybe we're wearing our tinfoil hats
no, they
and
don't
all.
use that number ever.
Right. Yeah. They've never used that.
Okay. Let me see. The man, these entries get okay. No. President John F. Kennedy assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas, Texas, November 22nd.
November 22nd. So it just seems like a lot of things happen on this day.
Yeah,
But, and
well,
yep. Go ahead. Did you have something you want to add?
no, I was gonna say that that's like the signature, on the
Yeah.
event, saying that, there's I don't know. That's a guess from my well, from a lot of my research is when you see those dates reoccurring, it's because it's part of the cycle, it's part of the theater, that's how it works.
Yeah, this November 22nd date, there is no mystery. There's something to that date. That it's a signal, it's a communication thing, it's something. And especially this dude died at 33. Even back then, that was really young to die that young. So Thomas Yale's father, or yeah, Thomas Yale Sr.'s father, Chancellor David Yale, made his will on August 15th, 1625, probate at the Consistory Court of Chester, June 16th, 1626. It left 20 pounds each to three children of his eldest son, late deceased, securing in a primary legal document the identities and survivorship of David, Thomas, and Anne Yale. This is the record that carries the patriarch's line definitively into the next generation. So this is inheritance. Basically, your will is he's passing the property forward of the family. So before 1628, by license cited date July 4th, 1627, Anne Lloyd married secondly her second marriage, the London merchant Theophilus Eaton, future first governor of New Haven Colony. Eaton brought Anne and her three Yale children to Boston aboard the Hector in 1638 and thence to New Haven. The Patriarch's branch thus passes out of Chester and into the colonial record at this point. So, 1627, she marries Theophilus Eaton. 16 by so 10 years, and then 10 years later she is coming over here on a ship with her children with the same
So
man.
at that
Oh,
time, he's already in the merchant business, right?
yes, yes, he's already in
Because
the
then
merchant.
that was in
He's already he's
1620.
already yeah, he's by 1616, he's already like running the merchant, the East Land Company. So he's already
Okay.
well in it by this time. Yeah.
Because the year that they got married and the year right before that, um, like 1626, the French company, which was called, quote, Company for the Islands of America, were incorporated. And then in
Huh.
1627, the Company of New France in Canada was also incorporated. So there's a lot of merchant trading company activity going on between late 1500s and this time. And here what we see is intermarrying of the merchant and other families for well reasons we'll probably get into.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so many companies were getting traded. That's actually one thing we are going to get into later, all throughout the 1500s, is all of these companies are being chartered. And Theophilus Eaton was at the very tippy top of one of these charter companies, which is just ironic because, once we get back into Elihu Yale, we see here Theophilus runs the East Land Company, and then out of this same part the same commercial enterprise that granted by Queen Elizabeth I, the East India Company, that is the company that Elihu Yale is the governor of at the point while as he donates makes the donation to the Yale Corporation. All right. So that wraps up Yale Senior, though. So let's get into Anne Lloyd Eaton, the woman he just married. Well, the woman he died married just before he died. Um, so Anne Lloyd was born into the household of a senior Church of England prelate. Her father, Bishop George Lloyd, rose from a Welsh clerical family to the bishopship in Cheshire. Her mother was Anne Wilkinson, daughter of John Wilkinson. The family carried a documented descent from the medieval princes of North Wales, a pedigree that later made Anne a heavily studied immigration ancestor. So Anne was the eldest daughter of Bishop George Lloyd and Anne Wilkinson, born 1590. Her royal descent from King John and from Llewellyn Fawr ap Laurel and his son David, Prince of Gwyn, the spine of the genealogical interest in her line. So when we talked about it earlier, she is the centerpiece of this whole thing. That is why, right there, is because she is a descendant from King John, and that is King John of the Magna Carta. Now, and King John wasn't on the good side of the Magna Carta. King John was the guy that all the other kings had to get together with and say, "Hey, dude, you're out of fucking control." So they come from the rowdy side of all of this stuff, and obviously this has to be of a lot of interest um, to Theophilus Eaton after Mr. Yale dies. So, and right here, 1611, 1612, Anne married Thomas Yale Sr., a Welsh kinsman, a distant cousin sharing the same princely descent of King John. A marriage license survived in the Diocese of Chester records dated 1611, 1612, and Thomas Yale will was the last extracted and published from the Episcopal Registry at Chester. Um. Oh yeah, there's some dispute on the dates, but it's not really important. Um. So 1613, that is when David Yale was born. Thomas Yale Sr. and Anne Lloyd, and that's David Yale Sr. who would marry Ursula Knight and become the father of Elihu Yale, which we just touched on earlier. So then we get the birth of Anne and Thomas Jr. that we just went through earlier. Thomas Jr. is the signer of the Fundamental Agreement of New Haven. So then we get to the death of Thomas Yale, 1619. We just talked about that, and that's where we are picking up right now. Anne married Theophilus Eaton, a London merchant and widower. In England, yeah, this was Theophilus Eaton's second marriage too. But in England, before 1628, the combined household eventually raised 8 children. Anne's 3 children, Eaton's 2 surviving children from his first marriage, and 3 children of the Eaton union. So in June 26, 1637, Anne, her husband, her Yale children, and other family members sailed on the Hector of London, landing at Boston as part of the Davenport Eaton Company that would shortly found New Haven. 1638, 1639, the company removed from Boston to Quinnipiac, founding New Haven. Oh yeah, they originally landed in Boston. Everybody started off in Boston, and they bought Quinnipiac from the Indian tribe, and that's how they got the royal charter eventually after they got folded into Connecticut. But anyways, founding New Haven in 1638, the Fundamental Agreement was adopted June 4th, 1639, and Theophilus Eaton was chosen governor and thus became the colony's first lady, a position that later shielded her from outright banishment. She was apparently a wild woman. So 1644, after adopting anti uh Paedo Baptist, I guess that's what it is. It's adult after adopting adult baptism views and withdrawing from worship whenever infant baptism was administered, Anne was brought before the brethren of the New Haven Church. John Davenport prosecuted. And John Davenport, that's the guy we talked about in our last Yale series. The proceedings, the trial of Mrs. Eaton mixed her theological dissent with a long list of alleged domestic offenses. She was censured on the 14th day, the 6th month, in 1644. 44.
Wow,
Um,
interesting. So,
yeah.
because here's the thing about, when they, and this is just my commentary off of what I'm reading here, but so she was adopting anti-Paedo Baptist views, which basically means that she did not believe that infants should be baptized; they should be baptized as adults. Is that how I'm
Yes.
reading that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yep.
if you
Go
think
ahead.
about it, if when someone is baptized, a baptismal certificate is issued, and that certificate is then finds all its way up, and it acted
Oh, fuck.
effectively
I didn't
like
even think about
a birth
that.
certificate. So what
Yeah.
she was saying is, well, hold on, this person did not agree to be baptized and have their soul in the hands of the church. They should wait till they're an adult and they have discernment, then they should do it. And she was reprimanded for it.
Yeah, yeah, which yeah, that is a very that's a very back then that was a very deep theological point between Protestants and Catholics too.
So
Um
it's just interesting that Anne, who's the link between these, actually is pushing back, saying, no, don't issue that birth certificate, that baptismal certificate to that infant who is not of the age of majority. Like they didn't decide to give themselves up. Don't lock them up in a life of fraud. Wait till they're an adult.
yeah. Yep, yep. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it, but yeah, you're exactly right. That's really that.
And so
Yep.
John Davenport was the one that was coming after her.
Apparently, yeah, and he's supposed to be the whole Calvinist Baptist guy.
Yeah,
So,
and they
yeah.
mixed her theological dissent with a long list of alleged domestic offenses. So what that tells me is that John Davenport was sitting in a jurisdiction where he can adjudicate theologically as well as maybe civilly, domestic, the whole thing. Because they're like,
Yeah,
well,
I bet
you've got
he
some
was
theological dissent here we're going to have to address. Also, there's a bunch of other probably trumped up charges, alleged domestic offenses like she's rude or whatever,
yeah, yeah, whatever it was. Yeah. Yeah,
whatever they
yeah,
try
that's
to.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Davenport was probably some sort of like chancellor in the town, I would imagine. Yeah, you're probably right.
well,
Yeah.
wasn't he the one that's basically started the whole thing in New Haven?
Yeah. Yep, yep, he was. Yeah, it was
Well,
his
he would
idea
be
to
the
start the whole
principal
thing.
then, right? He would be the principal
Yep.
or the governor who has a court who has they set the laws, they make the laws, especially
Well,
if that was granted under a charter.
yeah, Theophilus actually his like best friend because Davenport and Theophilus they grew up together. They were friends and grew up together. And they actually named Theophilus the first governor, and then it was Davenport that basically he was the first rector or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he had the theological side of
Well, he was the
everything.
first rector.
I think so, if I'm remembering that right. I could
Well,
be
that would make
remembering that
sense
wrong.
because if you think about it, a rector, that is that's a church position where they
Yes,
basically
yeah, it
the
was.
record
Yep.
they oversee all of the records because here in the United States we have something called rector of the national shrine, which is basically the Pope's representative. And so if he was the first rector, then absolutely he would be for issuing baptismal certificates because that's part of their game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you're probably right. What I always, ever since I first learned about all this shit, I was like, man, John Davenport and Theophilus Eaton, they don't seem like a very likely pair, bro. And they supposedly grew up with each other and stuff. And I'm just like, man,
And
I don't
then
know.
Davenport's over here prosecuting his wife.
Right. Yeah. Right. I'm like, what's really going on here, dude?
Yeah,
Like,
it's like he's not going after Theophilus, is he? He's just going after his wife.
no, yeah, he never went after Theophilus, just his wife. So they were in the back rooms. Like, he's like, dude, this chick is crazy. Fucking get her in line for me, bro.
Dude, bro, I met. He's like, man, I met this chick for the first 6 months. It was cool, but now she's wild, man. I don't get.
Yeah, I married her and she went crazy. I brought her over to America and she lost her mind. Oh, yeah. All right. So,
Oh,
so that brings us to her excommunication. 1645, roughly 9 months after the censure, the New Haven Church excommunicated Anne for her continued refusal to conform on baptism. Because she was the governor's wife, she was not banished as Anne Hutchinson, which is another very interesting character we'll probably talk about. Had been in Anne Hutchinson had been in Massachusetts. Instead, she remained in New Haven under what later writers described as virtual house arrest for some 11 years. There's that 11 again.
Well,
But
she was put on administrative leave without pay.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. So, um, and March 10th, 1646, New Haven Meeting House seating plan read at the General Court meeting, and old Mrs. Eaton was assigned a place, a small record that nonetheless fixes her continued, if marginalized, presence in the congregation after excommunication. So basically, they're just bolstering the point. Even after all of that, everything was said and done, she was still excommunicated from the community. So we get to
It's
January.
interesting that her name is Anne and she got what happened to her. And then in Massachusetts, that other woman's name was also Anne. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, yeah, and they started in Boston too. So I don't know exactly what Anne Hutchinson's theology was, but I wonder if it has something to do with baptism. That would be interesting.
I'll look it up real quick while you're going through this.
Okay, cool.
What year was
Uh
Anne Hutchinson removed from Massachusetts?
it would be right 1620s, I think, 1630s. I can't remember the year.
All right,
Uh,
I'll look at it real quick.
okay, so this was 1645 that our Anne we're talking about got excommunicated. So it would have been before that. I think it was 1630s. Okay, so we get to January 7th, 1657. Governor Theophilus Eaton died in New Haven, January 7th, 1657. Um, oh, in old style. So yeah, this is before all the calendars changed. So that's why a lot of these oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was wondering why all these dates are messed up and stuff. That's why a lot of these records, the dates on the records are conflicting because this is before the calendars changed. The calendars didn't change until the 1700s, so this is before all that. And that's, obviously we go through and then that's going to muddy up the records a little bit. But he dies January 7th, 1657. So his death removed Anne's prosecution within the colony and freed her to leave. So he's dead. She's free to go, which I'm sure everybody in the community was happy about. So,
All right, he's dead. Can you get out now? Thanks.
right. Yeah, I'm sure everybody was happy to hear that.
And
So
so that
soon
was
as
that. What year was that?
1645.
Okay, so I found the other Anne, which
Okay.
there's a lot of parallels between um, Anne that we're talking about that got excommunicated and disagreed, and then this other Anne, who Anne Hutchinson was not the wife of a Massachusetts governor. She was the wife of William Hutchinson, an affluent textile merchant. Her primary
Ah,
conflict, her
mhm.
primary conflict was with John Winthrop, who served as the governor of the Massachusetts Bay colony and led her trial for heresy during the antinomian controversy. While Anne Hutchinson held significant influence and challenged the colony's religious and political authorities, her husband William Hutchinson never held the office of governor. After she was banished in 1638, they relocated to Rhode Island, and on it goes. But so again, here we have is the wife of a prominent textile merchant questioning the religious and political authorities. So that's kind of the
That's
uh,
interesting. Yeah,
link there.
that
But what's crazy is he served and he led her trial for heresy during what's called the antinomian controversy. Well, that right there, nomian, that is a Latin derivation of the word name. And we have antinomium, so that means anti-name controversy. And I wonder if that's a link to the baptismal certificate and the name.
guaranteed has to be.
So I'm going to
Yeah.
do some background on that real quick while you keep going.
Okay. Yep. Yep. So basically, after her husband's death, Theophilus Eden, soon after her husband's death, Anne returned to England with her children Hannah and Theophilus Jr., ending 2 decades in New England. She wanted to get out. So Anne Lloyd Yale Eaton died August 1656, or 59, sorry, shortly after returning to England at Seven Oaks in Chester, closing the life that physically links the Yale and Eton founding lines, which whatever that's obviously debatable because we see Mr. Elihu later. Okay. So that finishes up Anne Lloyd Eaton, and she's the crux she's a real crux to this whole thing. Because of her familial ties, and they were obviously just trying to keep it in the family. As you know, we see in the mind map here, um, her father is a Lloyd. Thomas Yale's senior's mother is a Lloyd. Um, so they're obviously on the. I'm gonna have to do some more research in that and just keep drawing this line back because there's obviously something else going on there, and it obviously strings us all the way along to the founding of New Haven and eventually to the founding of Yale. So that which brings us to back to the founding of New Haven. We're gonna get into this guy right here, Thomas Yale Jr. And we're up on the first hour, so I don't know how I'm gonna do this. We know so Thomas Yale, it comes from the same line of the Yales, obviously baptized in Chester in 1616. So then his father dies, obviously 1619, leaving Anne widowed. He is 1627. She marries Theophilus. Um they move to or they marry and okay. Thomas thereby Eaton's stepson, the household link that carried the Yale children into the New Haven migration decades later. Okay, yeah. So in 1636, June 15th, Thomas Yale, son of Thomas Yale of Chester, gentleman, was bound apprentice to his stepfather, Theophilus Eaton, in worshipful company of grocers in London, a formal placement into the mercantile world Eaton commanded. So that is pretty important right there. So 1636, Thomas Yale Jr. is apprenticed to Theophilus Eaton, to which I don't know why I
Worshipful
didn't.
company of grocers.
Yeah, that's I don't know why I didn't look that up
I wonder if
earlier.
that word grocery has anything to do with that word grok. I don't know. I've always thought about that, but
I mean, it
um,
might come from the same etymology. And the grocers is a weird word. There's
yeah, a
definitely
worshipful company at grocers. Like, am I taking my prayer rug to Walmart? Like, what the hell are they talking about?
right.
You know,
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, they're very they think a lot of themselves, don't
dude, I
they?
don't know if you knew this. I just found something about a link between the Eatons, Yale, and Harvard. I just found this in the book.
Oh, his brother?
1636, Harvard College, so called from 1639 in tribute to John Harvard, who endowed it by a legacy.
Yeah.
Harvard College was found at Newtown, Cambridge, Massachusetts, with Nathaniel Eaton as his first president,
Yes.
1636.
Yes. Yep. We were gonna get it. Yeah, we're gonna get into that in the second hour a little bit. I didn't want to get too into him because he actually has a wild fucking story. And people are just gonna
Don't
have
they
to go to
all?
the second hour for that because yeah, it's actually pretty crazy. They actually had to shut down Harvard because of him, and then it went dormant for like 5 years before they reopened
But
because
look,
of
what's
the
crazy is they're establishing the Ivy League schools, and they're all the
yeah.
same families that are establishing them, and they have commercial merchant ties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. See, and the reason why this part right here is so important is because Thomas Yale, it wasn't any of the other children that were apprenticed to his stepfather Theophilus Eaton at the Worshipful Company of Grocers. It was Thomas Yale, Thomas Yale Jr., the one who signed the fundamental agreement. So two merchants right here. We got our supposed clergyman right here, and then two merchants signed the fundamental agreement. And we haven't even gotten into all of these dudes right here. The Goodyear right here. I have a feeling that's of the same Goodyear family of the Goodyear tires. I'm pretty sure
Gotta
that's the
be.
same guy right there. Got to be. We got a Dixon, a Gilbert, Punderson, all of the Nathaniel Turner. I That name seems very familiar.
Turner
Um,
Classic Movies.
yeah, exactly. Turner. Yeah, that's a big name. See, we haven't even gotten into all of these dudes, and we've already got two merchants and yeah. I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that Davenport's kind of a fake. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about him. I feel about
It's
him yet.
here's the thing. It's either all real or it's all fake. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, but yeah. So the important thing is we got two merchant. That's the point I'm trying to get at here. Is there's two merchants that signed this fundamental agreement that is supposedly they're supposed to be governed by the Bible. But you got it seems like you got a lot of commercial interest here.
And I will
Um,
say that it's supposed to be about the Bible, but when I looked into that antinomian controversy, that's when they really are. There's people raising the red flags about basically antinomian controversy means against the law and against works and pro grace.
oh, yeah, okay.
And so
Yeah.
that's why those two ands, both in Massachusetts and the New Haven colony, got ejected, is because they had what I'm assuming are Protestant leanings when it wasn't about acts, which are strictly according to the law. It was about grace, and that's what I was digging up while you were talking.
Hmm.
Because antinomianism literally means being, quote, against or opposed to the law, and was a term used by critics of those Massachusetts colonists who advocating the preaching of free grace. The term implied
Mm.
behavior that was immoral and heterodox, being beyond the limits of religious orthodoxy. The free grace advocates were also called Anabaptists and familists, or familists,
Mm-hmm.
groups that were
Yeah.
considered heretical in New England. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the whole
I think
Anabaptist thing, that's
there
interesting.
so it
Okay.
looks to be like there's a little bit of Protestant leanings. Well, good for those women too, who
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
basically
Yeah,
that they
standing up
were
for what
saying,
they
hey,
thought
you
was
know
right.
what? I think we should be a little bit more Protestant over here, and they got ejected. So good for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting because, this is a Protestant country. It almost seems like these guys were little ninjas sent in here the more we're getting into this thing.
And who's to say that,
Um,
I'm like, a lot of these upper families, some people marry in under completely false pretenses and actually didn't know what they were getting into.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then yeah, then they get a really weird rude wake up call.
Yeah, and then that's when, they get divorced, they get excommunicated and that
Yep.
kind of, I mean, they're all part of the elite. So, there's strict rules, but when one of them dissents, I think that's where we start getting all the factions and everything that start vying for power.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, it's so funny. We were just talking about the Nathaniel Turner guy. This is so we're gonna go over this, and this is gonna close it up for the first hour, and then we'll probably hit a little bit of this stuff in the second hour because I do want to finish up. Because he's, this is another money guy out here. But these last 2 points on July 1st, 1644, the adult male inhabitants of New Haven, Thomas Yale among them, took an oath of fidelity to the jurisdiction. A formal renewal of allegiance entered in the colony records. So all of these dudes took an oath of allegiance to New Haven. And I mean, it seems like all of these families stuck with that oath of allegiance. It seems like they still stuck to it to these days. Um, but in 1645, this Thomas Yale married Mary Turner, eldest daughter of Captain Nathaniel Turner of New Haven, himself 639 signed. That's the dude we were just talking about. Nathaniel Turner was lost at sea aboard the Lumberton's Phantom ship, which sailed to New Haven January 1646 and never returned. The marriage produced 8 children who reached adulthood. Interesting. So there we have intermarriages again, as we're talking about it. So obviously, I think I'm thinking probably Captain Nathaniel Turner is probably the next person we'll go into on the founding of New Haven here. Um, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, yeah, so that gets us up to the death of Theophilus Eaton, and he yeah, so he did go back to England, but then it looks like he actually returned to take care of his business. Returning to New Haven the following year. Yeah, so he left with his mother after Theophilus Eaton's death, but then he returned the next year to um attend to his business. So, but that's all we got for the first hour here. Um, this was a pretty interesting study and continuation into the founding of New Haven because that is still where we're at. We really actually haven't even gotten into the founding of Yale yet, but that's going to conclude it for this hour. So I hope to see everybody over at the second hour over on truelifeproduction.com. All you got to do is go there, truelifeproduction.com, click the Learning Out Loud podcast banner up at the top. And then there's a button that says become a member. You click that, and for $8 a month, you can get all of the extra stuff, including the second hour of this podcast, where we are going to finish off Thomas Yale Jr. and get into Theophilus Eaton and the Elizabethan commercial expansion companies, to which Theophilus Eaton was the agent of the East Land Company. So, hope to see everybody over there, and never forget to seek truth and honor the Creator above all, and let that be the whole of the law.
That's the important thing here, is that everyone's word should be meant for a use.
And the words that I'm using today are meant to pull down idols within people's temples.
Meaning that I want to destroy
Falsities that they have idolized.
for their entire life.
And just pull those out and sweep them clean. And before that temple,
And get reinfested with a new lie. Give it true life.